All right, fall market, Halifax. What can people expect?
You know what? I think it might be a bit of a mixed bag, Todd. I'm not sure. There are more listings, and I can tell you, any of these like above 600,000 seem to be sitting a long time, and a lot longer than they were maybe even like a couple of months ago. It's still very, very hot. And I talked to a few realtors here, and they said any of these sub 500, they're like going, and there's multiple offers. That is really where that hot market is. And the challenge is there's just not enough. Mm-hmm. There's just not enough inventory. There's more people that want to buy, and there's not enough people that want to sell. And I think part of the reason that there's not enough sellers is maybe the people who own a starter home right now are not buying a more expensive or a bigger home due to the cost of borrowing. But as the cost of borrowing goes down, maybe that, will motivate some people to buy some bigger homes. Mm-hmm. And there certainly are some homes being built, but not enough. Yeah. And we need all levels of housing here. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter, apartments, townhomes, single-family homes, affordable housing. We need all style of housing here in Halifax.
Yeah, affordable housing, though. I mean, what is affordable?
I'm not even that concerned about building the affordable housing, mm-hmm. and I'll tell you the reason why. I think that if we have more supply, it will drive the price down. Yeah. And I think if we're even building homes that are at the top of the marketplace, people will then fill out those homes, and the less expensive homes will become available. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It will be like a cyclone or whatever. Yeah. It will suck up and leave the starter homes available for people. I think at the beginning of the marketplace, I think that is going to happen.
Yeah, there are communities like Enfield and out beyond that, and that old road heading to Truro. It's amazing how much residential is surrounding Halifax.
If you go off of some of those exits, you would be shocked.
Yeah, Fall River
with the huge amount of homes that are out there. Yeah. For me, I find that a bit far to live and work downtown, but it works for a lot of people, and they do it. Yeah. Obviously, the cost of fuel is a consideration. The cost of transportation, that's not for everyone. And I think when you are looking at a home, it's location, location, location. Mm-hmm. You can always change the home. It's more challenging to change the location, really. Yeah. Because that involves selling and buying. Anything is possible, but I always like to tell people, the location is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. You can buy, the worst home on the best street, and usually you'll make out okay. Yeah.
People coming from Toronto, Ottawa, places like that, buying, is that that's really tailed off?
I think it is definitely has gone down quite a bit from what we were seeing in 2020, 2021, 2022. Mm-hmm. We're not seeing the people come from Ontario. I think, firstly, I don't think employers are just like carte blanche letting their employees work from home forever. I don't think that's happening. Mm-hmm. I think more and more, even we hear like government agencies, like they're going back to work. If not full time, they're back 2 days, 3 days, 4 days back in the office. We need people back downtown. Mm-hmm. We need these people driving, economies at the cores of our country. We have some so beautiful cities in Canada, and really underutilized, I think, right now, because a lot of people are not, they haven't returned. Yeah, not yet anyway.
So some considerations that I think people need to have in mind when purchasing is obviously this wildfire thing that happened in Halifax, and this concern about
the lack of even services, like the city water,
and all. I mean, these are things that I think good realtors and people should be aware of, right?
These are things to think about that people I don't think even crosses their mind when they're out shopping for a home. I think the number one thing people look at is price. And I think the number two is probably amount of bedrooms and bathrooms. And then they start looking at finishes. Mm-hmm. We're not thinking about as much maybe the location or what does your commute look like? What are the operating expenses of that home? How much is the property tax going to be?
Insurance. Are there any concerns about insurance?
Heating costs. Is there any deferred maintenance? Like, these are all the things that go through my mind. Yeah. But I'm thinking about dollars and cents every day, right? Mm-hmm. It's not so emotional for me. Yeah. But I think when you're buying a home, these are the things that sometimes get overlooked. Mm-hmm. And, I think people could have a smoother transition into home ownership, and probably better for their budget if they think about a few of these things going into it.
Yeah, like floodplains, and we know what happened, of course, with the Sackville River last year. Again, a big flood, and a lot of these homes now, people are basically saying they're unsellable.
And just even the concerns with insurance after a claim, are you able to get insurance again?
Sure.
That can certainly be a problem, and there certainly are areas that are going to become more and more prone to some of these natural disasters, just due to their geography and the topography of their lot, for example. It's certainly something to think about, and I don't think it should be something that people just take very lightly. And coming back to the floods and the fires, some mortgage lenders really paused funding mortgages for people that were either refinancing, renewing, or buying a home in some of these areas. And they also required an additional appraisal of the property to, just confirm that the property was not impacted by any of these things. That put a bad taste in some borrowers' mouths. I'll be honest with you.
So what's that?
It put a bad taste in my mouth too as a mortgage broker.
Right.
But I do understand why. The lender's trying to protect themselves, but they're also trying to protect the borrower sometimes from themselves. You know what I mean? They want to make sure that the property wasn't impacted.
All right, so if I have a home in one of these floodplains and my lender says we don't want to renew your mortgage, what do you do? Have to sell it? Is that
you might have to sell, or maybe you have to refinance. That would be very rare, Todd.
Yeah.
I've not seen a situation where a lender's like, hey, you need to pay out your mortgage because you're in a floodplain. Usually it's something like, you need to pay out your mortgage because you're not making your mortgage payments on time. Or, we're no longer renewing mortgages. Maybe we're exiting the marketplace. There's various reasons why a lender may not want to renew someone. I don't think it being in a floodplain would be one of them. What might happen is, if your insurance company no longer wants to insure you and you can't get home insurance, then the lender wants to be paid out because they want to make sure they're protected and that they're the first loss payee on that insurance. That, I would say, would be a lot more probable in terms of a situation where the lender would be like, hey, we have to call this mortgage because you don't have home insurance anymore. But I think you would always get insurance.
Yeah.
It's just, how costly is that insurance going to be?
Yeah.
You can always insure. Just the more risky it's going to be, the more costly that insurance is going to be.
Well, when you've got some insurers who are tapping out of a certain market, I mean that's
there are insurance companies that have exited insuring in Nova Scotia or certain areas in Nova Scotia just due to the risk.
Yeah,
that has happened.
Yeah. What about coastal properties? Because we know, and again, this show is not political, but
like erosion.
Yeah. Well, the Coastal Protection Act, in which the Houston government has walked away from, which would have impacted a lot of development. So, what advice do you give people if they're looking at a property along the coast?
I think sometimes it's buyer beware.
Yeah.
The ocean is a very powerful beast, and the climate's changing here in Nova Scotia. Do I think this is going to be Florida? Probably not in our lifetime. But the weather is different now than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You can visibly see the changes in our environment here in Nova Scotia. That is having an impact on the ocean, and it's having an impact on the coastline. So if you're building or buying a home on the coast, you want to make sure that house is going to be good for the next 40 years.
Right.
Ish.
Yeah.
At least. It would be great if it'd be good for 100 years. I mean, that's not realistic to maybe predict. Yeah. But you want to make sure that you have 40 years of a runway, especially if you're getting a mortgage. You don't want to be paying a mortgage for 25 years and then suddenly your house is no good anymore.
Right.
You want to make sure that there is some runway. The lender also wants to make sure there's some runway. So when we get an appraisal of a property, it has on there the estimated economic remaining life of that property. And that always needs to be longer than the length of the mortgage. So if that property is pretty run down, the economic life might not be long. That means that if the lender even lets you do it, it might mean that the amortization needs to be very short.
Yeah. Well, and again, the market is
changing.
Yeah, but these are things that have always happened, right? The market's always cyclical. These things always, the history repeats itself.
History does repeat itself, just like rates. Just like political, just like the real estate market, it all shifts, and that pendulum does swing from one end to the other. And ideally, we want the pendulum to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be super, super liberal. We probably don't want it to be super, super conservative. We want it to be somewhere in the middle. And that's the challenge. It's really tough to find where is that middle, because I think the middle's moving.
Yeah.
And there's other, there's a lot of forces at play here. Political, economic, and, obviously the environment. There's a lot of pressures that are impacting borrowers, and obviously policies and things that are going to impact things down the road.
Yeah, and of course, first-time buyers, and there is a lot of people out there who feel discouraged because they can't get into a house. And
I think they were excited when we came back and said, hey, the 30-year amortization is coming back, and it's launched.
Yeah.
Many lenders have launched, not every lender, but many lenders have launched their 30-year amortization for first-time home buyers that buy new constructed properties. And this is only for first-time home buyers. I think it's a great program. I would personally take advantage of it myself if I was a first-time home buyer and buying a new construction property. But there's not enough new construction here in Halifax yet. I think there's going to be a lot more construction to come, but it's going to be a while before we get the amount of supply available that it's going to meet the needs of a first-time home buyer. A lot of the new construction that we're doing, these are not entry-level homes. Even condos, these are not for entry-level buyers, most of them. Right?
Yeah. Well, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives released a report on affordability in Nova Scotia, and what they say is two people with two kids need to make both people need to make $28 an hour over a 35-hour week, and that's that's over $100,000 a year combined household income.
Yeah, that would be like 110, 112, 115,000 a year.
Something like that, and there are many people that are so far outside of that bubble, working people, that there is. I get why people are discouraged, is what I'm saying.
I do too, and it is frustrating. The incomes have not paced at the same level the cost of housing has paced. Part of that is supply and demand, and part of it is the cost of borrowing. Yeah. There's a couple layers here at play. The incomes will continue to increase, but our incomes here always lag the rest of the country. Yeah. They always have.
Yeah, but our expenses don't at this point. When you think about it.
It used to be a good place where it was, affordable. And I think, let's be honest, Todd, our housing is very affordable.
Yeah.
Our listeners may not agree with me. It is very, very affordable. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we come back. If you've liked what you've heard and you want to learn more, feel free to visit us online at teamclinton.ca.